communicating with our users is one of our biggest tasks as product managers, but we are not there to talk with them. So we use all sorts of copy and micro copy. We use text fields and forms and buttons and all the things that we can use in order to direct the users as for the actions that we want them to take in our products. Sometimes it works, oftentimes it does not work. And this is exactly why we're meeting here today on this product league stage to educate ourselves together as for the 5 biggest mistakes that product managers do when they take on the task of UX writing. Welcome aboard to the Product League stage, leaguers. My name is Moria Cassis. I'm the founder and general manager of Product League, and I'm so happy to have you here with us today. Product League is an international mentoring program for product managers by product managers in 30 countries around the world. And today it's all about the challenge of writing engaging, informative, direct, and to the point UX writing, one that will both communicate your voice, your unique voice with the users, but also help them to navigate through the different journeys of your product. So I hope that you're ready. We're just about to start. But before that, I have a small request of you guys. Please, you know how algorithm works. So go ahead and click the like button, show us some product love, and then go to the chat and tell us who you are and where you're from. We want to get to know you. So please introduce yourself in the chat. Let's make this into our little product party. Can't wait to get to know you, and let's meet our speaker for today. Joining us live is Merav Levkowitz, UX writer consultant and trainer at Merav Levkowitz. So happy to have you here with us today. Merav, what's up? Can you hear me?
Hi.
Hi, hello. How are you? You can't hear me.
I'm good.
Okay. You can hear me, but there is a small delay. We're going to overcome this challenge. I think there is a small delay. We're going to work around that. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
That's perfect. It's good. Very excited to have you here with us today. We already have 2 leaguers that introduce themselves in the audience, in the chat. We have, I hope I pronounced your name correctly. Please forgive me in advance. Mumitul joining us from Bangladesh. Our very own leaguer and mentee at Product League, Efrat Kat, joining us here from Tel Aviv. So happy to see you here, guys, and so happy to see the other leaguers that are going to introduce themselves in the chat. Today, Merav, we're going to tackle a big challenge together because UX writing is something that most product managers are terrified of. They won't tell you that, but I'm here to tell you that. So there is a big challenge here. Okay, a big one, and I'm sure that you're going to talk with us and walk us through the different challenges and mistakes to avoid. This is what we're here to discuss today. And actually, we don't stop here because you're also here to answer all the questions that our audience have in mind. Yeah.
Yes,
so leaders,
definitely. Yep.
Everything
I think
on
we
your
can
mind.
tackle this challenge.
Exactly. Merav is here on your side. This is not something that happens every day. Bring it on. Everything this is on your mind and heart when it comes to UX writing. Please do so. Introduce yourself in the chat. Let us know your questions. Interact with us because Merav really wants to get to know you, and so am I. We really want to understand what are your challenges and what are your tasks even when it comes to UX writing. Let's see who we have here. We have Ariella joining us from New York. We have Ben joining us from Tel Aviv. Barak, another mentee of us, another leaguer is here. So happy to have you here with us. We have Anissa from North Carolina. Hello to you. We have Iran. We have Babu joining us from New Jersey. So happy to have you all here. Keep the comments coming. Keep the introductions coming because we want to turn this into our little product party. Merav, I can't wait to learn from you about UX writing and to discuss this big challenge with you. What do you say? Are we ready to start?
We are ready.
So let's do that. The Product League is yours. The Product League stage is yours. The floor is yours. I'm here to support in everything that you need. And we are going to meet again in just some time, because there is an amazing part of Q&A that you're going to deliver, where you're going to give the answers to all the questions that the users, the leaguers, are going to bring. Yes. So the stage is yours. See you soon, and break a leg.
Great. Well, thank you so much for having me. Thanks for that warm introduction. And I'm excited to see people all over, people who are having lunch, people who are having dinner, people who are probably, having a midnight snack. So thanks for having me. Really, really excited to be here. As people join, I'm going to start out. I'm going to introduce myself for sure in a minute or so. But before we get started, I always like to start with a story, because when you're a writer, people usually ask you, well, have you written anything that I know? They expect me to say, yes, I wrote that best-selling novel on the New York Times list. So that's not the kind of writing that we're going to be talking about today. And I want to start out with a little story that kind of gives you a taste of maybe what got me into this field to begin with, about 8 or 9 years ago. So I'm from the Boston area originally. I went to college in DC. Um, so if you're familiar with the East Coast of the US, you know that Boston and DC are both on the East Coast, but they're pretty far apart. They're about a 10-hour drive. So I used to fly back and forth when I would go to visit my parents during winter break, spring break, whatever. Um, so I used to fly, and you can see right now, probably a lot of anyone here who has ever booked a flight is probably familiar with what you see on the screen now, which is the JetBlue booking page. Pretty common. You're probably familiar with it. If you've never flown with JetBlue, then I'm sure you've seen it for another airline. Uh, Pretty standard. So it was just another day where I was booking a flight to go home to my parents. And what I would typically do was book the flight and then, select my departure, my return, all my flight options, pay. And then at the end, I would send it to my dad so that he would know when I'm landing so he can come pick me up. So one day I was booking just this ordinary flight that I would do at least, a couple times a year. And I booked the flight and I send my dad the ticket, and nothing happens. So I keep sending him the ticket, and I'm sending him, nothing happens. And then I give up. So a couple of minutes, I say, I'm not able to send this ticket. I will just, jot down the flight information and I'll give it to my dad afterwards. I'll call him up and tell him, hi, Dad, I'm landing in Boston at this and this time on such and such a date, and here's my flight number so you can come pick me up. So I closed the site, I closed the JetBlue site, and a couple minutes later, I get a call from my dad, and he says, Merav, stop sending me your itinerary. So what happened was his inbox started looking something like this. He got about 25 copies of my reservation. And what happened on my side was that I never got the confirmation that I expected to get. So typically, if you're sending something, you expect to see something, a message that says sent or itinerary sent or something like that. Something just short, 1, 2, 3 words that just confirm that the action happened. And I never got that message. So I just kept hitting send. And, yes, maybe it was a bug, maybe it was some issue that day. But basically, what happened was that I never got that confirmation that I was expecting. So I kept hitting send. And the message in the meantime was going through many, many times. Now, I tell that story because I just like to use it to kind of introduce how I got into this, why I care about these little bits of words, and the type of copy that we're going to be talking about today. Um, I'll also say that I was very lucky that day that I was sending it to my dad and not to a client or not to a professor or not to someone else who could have been really, really unhappy with me if that had been the case, that they got 25 emails from me in a row. So I was very lucky. But we're here to talk about the importance of those little bits of text, which sometimes we don't even think about until they're not there or they're not done well or they're somehow missing from the experience. So on that note, hi everyone, I'm Merav. Thanks for joining me. I'm so glad to see people from all over the world, and please continue writing in the chat where you're from so I know, because it's always really cool on these virtual stages to see kind of who joins us. So as I said, I'm not the kind of writer who writes a New York Times best-selling novel, maybe in the future. But I'm a UX writer and a lecturer on stages like these and real stages and real offices. And I founded one of the few UX writing agencies in the world. There aren't a lot of UX writers in the world in general. And I have a small boutique agency. And what we do is that we work with lots of different companies on the copy within their products. And I also do workshops and webinars and trainings for all sorts of companies, for teams at Amazon and Google and all sorts of startups on how to write better copy. And so usually the people that I'm talking to are people like you, product people, designers, other writers. And the goal is to write the copy that drives the products that you're creating. So that's what we're here to talk about today. So before we kind of jump in, I'd love to hear, tell me in the chat what you know about UX writing, why you're here, what interests you, and what you think PMs get wrong. Because the topic here that we're talking about is the top 5 UX writing mistakes made by product managers. So I want to know what you think you're getting wrong, or what you think product people at your company or on your team are getting wrong, before we dive in. So I'll give it, let's give it a second and see if anyone wants to take some guesses or tell me kind of what you think you know about UX writing, or what drew you to this topic today. I'll give it a second and then we'll kind of dive in. All right, so while you're kind of letting those wheels turn and thinking about it, I see clear navigation instructions. Yeah, definitely. And that ties in really well to what I'm about to say, which is that I like to think about UX writing as the words that guide you through a product. They're sort of like the road signs in any product, right? They tell you where to click, they tell you what buttons to use, they tell you um, what you need to do next, or what you can expect to happen next. So they're the road signs. They guide you through a product, and the product really can't work without them. If you think about any product that you use any day on any given day, even this whatever platform you're using to watch this webinar right now, to watch this meeting, has all sorts of text that help you understand how to use it and what to do and what you're going to do next. So that's how I like to think of UX writing. And I'll just say as a quick note that some other terms that you might hear for UX writing are microcopy or content design. Those are kind of the terms that we use. Personally, I use UX writing a lot, but content design I feel is a term that is growing in popularity. And we are definitely, as an industry, moving towards it, because we do a lot of times do more than just write. We're designing the content, or designing the content experience. So you may hear me use all those terms kind of interchangeably. So I just want you to be aware of that. Okay, so we're going to go through the 5 mistakes that product managers make, and I see that some people are weighing in here in the comments, so that's great. Alternative flows can definitely be a challenge to get right. Thank you. How to convey true potential, or how to convey the value, guiding users through the user experience. Great. Yeah, thanks. Thanks for weighing in. So now we're going to dive into some of the top 5 mistakes. And we'll look at some examples, and I'll talk about them, and hopefully you'll come out of here with different thoughts that you can apply in your day-to-day work. So mistake or myth number 1 is that people don't read. People love to say this in this day and age where everything happens online, and we're constantly, switching between platforms and messages and all sorts of different things. We love to talk about how print is dead and publishing is dead and reading is dead and nobody reads. Okay, so that is not true. People do read. People read, though, when it matters to them. If you think about how many different sources of content and words you encounter on any given day, I'm talking about from your cell phone to your computer, to the shampoo bottle, to the medicine bottle that you're using every single day. You are reading all day, every day. So you're going to read things that matter to you, because there's a constant information overload when you're on any sort of device, and outside of any sort of device. And on that, I know this may be a little bit hard to see, but a couple of years ago, I just want to share an example that a couple of years ago, Capital One did a test where they were redoing their forms. And then the person who was leading this, Sarah Walsh, presented this, and she shared that they took one of their big forms for creating a business account, and they actually turned it into something with many more words than it had before. So on the left, you can see that their starting version of the form had 70 words. And after user testing and after all sorts of iterations to make the form better, they ended up with a form that was 182 words. So that is more than double. Um, and what they found was that this was what they really needed to convey the experience, to convey the proper user experience, and to help guide users through what they wanted them to happen. So people were reading, and every time they added more text here, people were reading because it helped them achieve the goal that they wanted to achieve. So that's what I want to say about that. That myth, people don't read. People, they may scan first, but they're going to read it if it matters to them. So here we're going to look at a couple of examples. Here's an example from BetterHelp, the online therapy platform. And this is a payment screen where you sign up for 6 months of free therapy, and you have to put in your credit card number so that you can sign up just to secure it. And there's a lot of text on here. But this is one of those places where people will read because they're about to commit to, yeah, it's 6 months free, but after that, you're going to be charged. So you want to know when you're going into it, I want to read this screen. And when I encountered this screen, I did read it because I was curious, and they say on this screen, the cost is $90 per week, charged every 4 weeks, includes a weekly live session and text, audio, and video messaging anytime. You will not be charged at all unless you decide to subscribe after your free therapy period ends. If you subscribe, your cost after free therapy will be $360. And then on the button, same thing. This is quite a long button, maybe longer than we're used to seeing in a product. Start your 6 months of free therapy. And the other option is I can't afford therapy. But this is one of those places where they could have skipped all of this and the experience probably wouldn't have been as good because people are committing and they want to know what that commitment is. Even if it is free right now, it's going to be for a limited period of time. They want to know, okay, what's happening after those 6 months? Here's another example. This is also from BetterHelp within that same flow, where they have a whole FAQ about with different questions. How much will it cost after the free 6 months? Why do you ask for my payment information now? How long will I use the service? So all of these, I'm not going to read them to you. You can look through their site. You'll find these things. But the point here is there is a lot of text on this screen. And the reason is because it communicates something. And I wasn't behind the scenes when BetterHelp was writing this copy, but I do believe that they probably did tests of, should we write more here? Should we write less? These are things that matter to people. They're committing to something to a mental health product. They're committing to paying. They have a free period. So all of these things are things that they want to know. And they'll probably stop, as I did when I saw this screen, when I was testing this whole flow out, and read through it and see, what does it mean? What am I committing to? And go through all of these questions so that they can really understand before they commit to it. Here's another example. This one's from Canva. And on Canva, it looks like there's a lot of text on this screen. On Canva, when you try to remove someone from your team, in this case, I was removing a user named Merav Wright's team from the Merav Wright's team. So it's a little bit confusing, but they don't just say, remove the person and that's it. They say, you have a bunch of options, and under each one it tells you what's going to happen. And this is important because this is a big move. If you remove someone from the team on Canva, their designs are going to be transferred. And so if those designs belong to them, then you might not have access to them. So this is something that we need to use the text to communicate because this is a big move. Just like that BetterHelp screen where someone's committing to something, which may be free at first, but then is going to cost quite a bit of money, maybe more money than we're used to paying on a subscriber basis, on a regular kind of monthly basis online. These things are things that have a big impact. And so we use our words to tell users, and then we can expect that in most cases, users are going to read this and they might even stop and read it a couple of times. So this is not the place where we want to skimp on words because we think that users don't read. If you have any questions, feel free to add them into the chat and we'll have time for a Q&A at the end. So don't be shy. That's mistake number one. Now we're going to move on to mistake number two. Mistake number two is that I have heard not just PMs, people in all different fields say anyone can fill in a few words. It's just a couple of words. What does it matter? Anyone can do this. We can just go over to the person who's a native English speaker and have them write it down, or we can go into the writer on our team or the marketing person and we can have them all fill it in. So here's a screen from Amazon where I removed all the text, and it could be any variety of things. I mean, feel free to weigh in the chat and tell me what you think is happening on this screen. Because right now, without the text, you can see that there's not much we can do here. I can type in some words, but I don't know what's going to happen. So weigh in and tell me what you think is happening in each one of these fields and the button on this specific Amazon flow. And you'll be able to, if you've used Amazon before and you've ordered through Amazon, then you probably have a few ideas. But if you've never used Amazon, then it might be a little bit harder to guess. Here's another example. This is from Chase, the banking and credit card company in the US. And same thing. I removed the words here and we're lost, right? I left the personal info so that we would at least have a starting point. But without the words here, we really don't know what to do. So I want to know who writes the product copy at your company. Who's responsible for writing the words that appear within your product? Let us know in the chat and we'll take a look at it as we go through. The reason that I ask is because I am curious to know if those people have the understanding of all the different things. If they're not UX writers or content designers, I'm interested to know, are they aware of all the different things that go into UX writing? And, I'm not trying to shame anyone here or blame anyone. I know that, we don't always have the ability to work with a UX writer, or we don't always have a UX writer on our team. But this is just a sort of illustration of all the different things that go into UX writing. On one hand, we have to understand the brand, and we have to know, what the company stands for and what its values are and what its messages are. We also need to understand the target audience and the user base. Who are they? Who are we targeting? And this is relevant. I see a comment about a B2B product. I write for B2B products. So this is relevant whether it's B2B or B2C or B2B2C. No matter what, we need to know who that target audience is and even what that end user's pain points are and what their goals are and all of that. So those are just two parts of it. We also have the parts of understanding the UI, right? I can't just come in and write whatever I want thinking that someone's going to read it. It has to tie into the behavior of the interface. So if there's a button, I'm going to want my text to make sense for a button. I'm not going to write a notification text that's going to appear on a button. So I need to understand all of these things. And then lastly, I need to understand that in a product, we have a flow or a journey. It's not just about the static screen. It's not a book that people are reading. They're not sitting down with my app and reading it top to bottom, probably. They're going through some sort of flow in order to accomplish some sort of goal, in order to do something, whether it's something that they have to do for work or for their personal life, whether they're searching for a bus line and using an app for that, or they're transferring money, or they're, using a scheduler to schedule their social media posts. So sometimes when we approach it as anyone can write it or anyone can fill it in, we end up, first of all, giving someone a job that may be on top of the job they already have. If they're a designer, then suddenly they become a designer and a writer. Or if they're a product manager, they become a product manager and a writer. But we also kind of forget, we also kind of end up leaving it to just whatever fits into the Figma or whatever fits into the wireframe. And we don't think about all the different things that go into it and that we have to stop and consider when we're working on this writing. Um, so I want to share a couple of examples of copy that was maybe written by someone who was just asked to fill in something on the Figma. So you can disregard most of the text on this, and I know it looks like a lot of text and hard to read. This is a Cisco product. This is a Cisco VPN that I was asked to use for one of my clients. Excuse me. And so they told me that I had to download this VPN and set it up so that I could so I could connect to all of their systems and work remotely. So they have a button. So I got to this website and they have this button here that says any connect in 99 seconds. So I clicked it. Now, weigh in and tell me in the chat what you think happened when I clicked that button. I'll give it a second or two. I'll give it a couple of seconds. Any guesses? Okay, I'll reveal the secret. What happened when I clicked on this button was that I got a video screen that opened and played a 99-second video. So that was not what I was expecting at all. And I didn't have any sense that that was what was going to happen because I actually came to this website and tried to download the VPN to my computer. And I expected that maybe this meant any connect in 99 seconds. Any connect is the name of the product. Any connect in 99 seconds meant that it would connect after 99 seconds, as people are now saying in the chat. But what happened was that I got a video, a 99-second video. So that's clearly an example of a mismatch, right, between what we expect, what someone, maybe the words that someone fills in, without really thinking about, what is that going to mean for the user? How is that going to tie into the behavior? That's writing text without thinking about all of those things that I showed kind of in that puzzle just a couple of slides ago. There's another example. This is an example it's an old example of canceling an order. I believe it's an old example from Squarespace. But we sometimes have this challenge when we are dealing with modals or pop-ups of cancellation flows, where we have this behavior where we are used to seeing the secondary button say cancel. So in this case, we have a pop-up that says cancel order. This will issue a full refund of $28 and move the order to the canceled tab. The customer will be automatically notified. And then the buttons are cancel and confirm. And this again is an example of someone, writing things without really thinking about all the different things that go into this experience and go into creating this product, because we had cancel order and then we have cancel, but wait, am I supposed to click cancel or am I supposed to click confirm? Am I, which one is going to cancel the order and which one is going to cancel me out of this pop-up? So these are all things that a UX writer or a product manager who's writing UX copy needs to think about. Another example for us, I don't know if any of you have a Chase credit card, but I do. And when I sign into my Chase account, for security reasons, they send me a one-time passcode. So then I end up on this screen where it says get verified, we sent you a text message, and then I have two fields. One of them, the field before this, by the way, is the screen before this has also two fields. And those two fields are email and password, which we're used to seeing, right? Right above, on pretty much any sign-in experience, you have email and the password. So I get to this, and then I have two fields once again, but the two fields are one-time code and password. And let me tell you that I have had this credit card for 5 years, 6 years, something like that. And I get this wrong every single time because I'm not used to seeing one-time code and then password. And those little bits of text here they're accurate, here in one field, I have to put in my one-time code, and in the next field, I have to put in my password. But they don't tie into the connections and the behaviors and understanding what people typically see in a place like this. So when we encounter a screen that looks like this, we typically expect it to either say email and password, email and then password, or we expect it to say password and then repeat password. One-time code and password totally sends it to a different place, which means that in my case, again, a 6-year member of this credit card, I get it wrong every single time. And only now have I started getting to a place where I copy the password first and I put it in the second field, which is why you see this screenshot the way that you see it. I copy it from the previous screen and then I go and get the one-time code. But this is a sign of someone who didn't really think about, when they were putting the labels on, they weren't thinking about the behavior that also went into it and the flow and all of that. So those are 2 mistakes, 2 down, 3 more to go. Mistake number 3 is when product managers think top competitor. So if you're a product manager, you know who your competitor is. You've studied them, you've looked at, what they're doing well and what they're not doing well and what they're doing better than you and all of that. But I want to challenge you that your top competitor might not be your top competitor. Why do I have this handwritten Post-it note on here? Okay, so you can see in my handwriting, my to-do list that I jotted down a couple of days ago. Buy balloons, bake cake. It was my daughter's birthday yesterday, so I was all in that mode. Finish slides for this. So why am I sharing this Post-it note, a real Post-it note? Okay, I tweaked it a little bit. I redacted it so that you wouldn't know exactly which client I was working on that day. But why am I sharing this Post-it note? The reason that I'm sharing this Post-it note is because I want you as a product person, as a product manager, as a designer to think about, remember the mistake that we're talking about here is who our top competitor is. Your top competitor is your top competitor, but your user also has so many other things on their mind. So as a UX writer, I'm also thinking about those other things. I know that my user isn't just thinking about the exact thing that's happening on the screen. They have 3,000 other things going on in their mind at the same time. Any one of us is thinking about the laundry and picking up our kids and messages that we have to take care of and work things and doctor's appointments and all of these things. And these are also competitors. And these may even be the bigger competitors that you have to think about. And what does this mean in the context of product and UX writing? This means that we are always going to try to write in a way that is simpler, that doesn't add more complication to the user experience, that doesn't add more cognitive overload. Now, the screen that I'm sharing now doesn't do that. This is the screen if you use Zoom as I do. I log into Zoom so regular, every single day. Sometimes I close it so that I closed it today so that I could log into this platform. So every time I log out or I close Zoom, then when I go in, I feel like my brain short circuits because I don't know how to deal with this screen. Join a meeting, sign up, sign in. When I talk about them now slowly, it seems pretty straightforward. Which one do I click on? But when I'm joining a meeting, when I'm opening Zoom, when I'm clicking on the Zoom icon on my desktop, that's usually 3 minutes before a meeting, 2 minutes before a meeting, 1 minute before a meeting, when I suddenly remember that I have to join this meeting. And then my brain has too many things happening, and these words do not help me. So as a UX writer, as a product manager working on UX writing, I don't want you to think about just the exact wording or your competitor or whatever it is that you need to think about specific to that competitor. I also want you to think about the fact that your competitor is all the other things that are happening to your user in that moment, which is life, because we all have a million things going on. And so our job when we're designing products, and certainly when we're writing the copy for them, is to think about how we can reduce that cognitive overload with our word choices. Let's look at a couple more examples. Here's an example from Apple that says, another example that makes my brain short circuit every single time. Allow messages to share. You have notifications silenced when using focus. When you're using do not disturb or another focus, messages will let your contacts know that you have notifications silenced, and the buttons say don't allow and okay. This is something that pops up on my computer if I have focus set up on my iPhone, which is do not disturb. So then basically the message here is that they're going to tell my contacts that I have notifications silenced in case anything important, is going on. In case I get any important messages, then maybe I want my contacts to know that actually I'm not looking at my phone or my messages right now. But this is so much more complicated than it needs to be. And every time I see this message, which is not that infrequently, I have to read it multiple times. And that's a failure. That's a failure of UX writing. If I have to read the message multiple times to understand what's happening, then we've failed. Here's a better example. This is an example from Google Meet. It's an empty state, and you can see that it says your meeting is safe. No one outside your organization can join a meeting unless invited or admitted by the host. And I like this because when I think about all those competitors and all those things that are taking up brain space, this is one way for Google Meet to say, we understand that you have all these concerns, and specifically in the context of our product, the concern that you have is that other people might be able to join your meeting, that it's public, that anyone can join. So we're going to tell you, we're going to use the space that we have on the screen to say, no one outside your organization can join unless they're invited. So that already reduces the cognitive overload on my brain. That already tells me, you don't have to worry about this thing, Merav. You have the birthday cake and the balloons and all that other stuff that you have to worry about. This is one thing that you don't have to worry about. Here's another example. This one's from Netflix. It's old. It's from many years ago. But it used to be that when you signed up for Netflix, you would get a screen that said, all of Netflix free for 30 days. And the thing, I believe it's still the case, but the thing about Netflix at the time was that if you signed up, you would get a free month, but you still had to put in your credit card to sign up. Excuse me. So you still have to put in your credit card to sign up, which is a point of friction, right? Because I have to give my credit card. I don't know. This was back before everyone knew what Netflix was and how awesome it is and whatever. So putting in your credit card, even if you're not going to be charged, is a point of friction because it's one of those things where you know that you're going to forget to cancel it on the 30th day, on the 31st day. And you know that you're going to end up being charged. And it's going to be so frustrating because you're going to have to call them. You're going to have to tell them, I forgot and I wanted to cancel it and blah, blah, blah. So the way that they deal with this and the way they deal with, in this case, all those other competitors taking up space in the user's mind is that they say, all of Netflix free for 30 days. And then they have this timeline. So if I sign up on this day, they say, we'll email you a reminder 3 days before your trial ends. Cancel any time before October 4th and you won't be charged. And then the timeline says to you, here's where you are now. We're gonna charge you on this day, but 3 days before that, we're gonna send you a reminder so that you know. And this is one of those messages. This is, a way that they can use text to reduce that competition, to reduce that cognitive overload that's going on in the user's brain. Another situation where we might encounter this is any sort of confirmation pop-up. So when you're deleting things, when you're removing permissions, when you're doing anything that you might regret, we're used to seeing those sort of "are you sure" type of messages. So the mistake that I see a lot of times is that people say, are you sure you want to delete this list? Well, I want to tell you that all of that fluff, the "are you sure you want to," is taking up way too much space on the screen and is taking up way too much space in your user's brain. And you can skip all of that and you can get right to the question you want to ask them. So here are two examples. One of them says, are you sure you want to delete this list and all its tasks? And the buttons are cancel and delete. And the second one says, do you want to delete this photo or remove it from the album? So the way that we can deal with that cognitive overload is by simplifying them. We can simplify the first one to delete this list and all of its tasks, cancel and delete. And the second one to delete this photo or remove it from this album. And then the buttons say remove from album and delete. So in all of those cases where you encounter these types of confirmation pop-ups, where you're tempted to say, are you sure you want to remove this person from your account? Take it off. Start with remove this person from your account. That's it. The user is going to be able to look at that screen quickly, and they're not going to have to rush into the middle of the sentence to understand what you're even asking. And in these specific cases, which they may be small when you're looking at them now, the two screenshots that I have now, you can see that the text is so tiny. These are from mobile screenshots. And the text could have filled one line instead of going down to the following line in both cases, and it would have been bigger and much easier to parse in this case, rather than this, are you sure you want to, which takes up all this brain space, and then I have to read it multiple times to understand what they're even asking me. Sorry. Okay, mistake number 4. Mistake number 4 is when people tell me, we're the experts, so we should sound like it. We're the experts, so we should sound professional. So I want to tell you this. No one has ever said that text was too easy to understand. So if you're feeling like you need to take the level up a notch, you need to make it more complicated, you need to make it more wordy, don't. Because easy to understand is never a problem. So when we're thinking about this in the context of UX writing and products, we want to aim for a product that's readable. And when we say readable, we mean typically for products that are for the general population, we're looking for a reading level or a writing level of 6th to 8th grade level. That's probably a lot lower than you expect. When we're talking about experts, products that are very technical, products for expert level people, we want to aim for a 10th to 12th grade level. Again, that's also something that it's probably at a lower level than you expect. But that's not a bad thing. By the way, there are ways to test this. You can search afterwards for readability tests, and you can pop text into there. I think Grammarly also does it, and you can just, copy text into it, and it will tell you what reading level you're at. So that is a way to make your product more accessible and reduce some of that cognitive overload that we were talking about, and reduce some of that friction. So let's look at some examples. This is an example from Zoom. Poor Zoom, I'm picking on them a lot today. This is an example that I got just a couple of days ago, this pop-up that says, your client has been successfully updated. Now, this one made me stop because I talk to my clients on Zoom. So when I get a message like this, I had a moment of sort of freak out of like, wait a second, what is my client being updated on? When really what they're saying is the product that sits on my computer, that architecture has been updated, which I didn't even know was happening. So this is an example of text that's way more technical than it needs to be on one hand, and also could potentially be confusing. In my case, I have clients and I use them and I talk to them on Zoom. So this for me was jarring. It was a little bit scary. Wait a second, what are they being updated on? Here's another example, and I'm guessing this one's a bug, but terminating connection due to conflict with recovery. This doesn't mean anything to me. I have a good understanding of technical things, but this doesn't mean anything to me. So I'm going to read this, and there are lots of words that I don't understand, and the average user just doesn't understand what words like this mean. Here's a better example. This is an example that says, page crashed. Unfortunately, something caused this page to quit. It might have been an extensions conflict or some other reason. Try reloading the page or navigate to another page to continue. You can see this is super accessible at a level that most of us can understand. This is text that doesn't get into termination and abortion and all sorts of different, technical things that are happening behind the scenes. It says something caused this page to quit. We can't tell you what it is, but here's what you can try instead. and that makes it much more accessible. I see there are lots of questions, so I'm looking forward to getting them all and answering them at the end. So if you are falling into this trap of thinking that you need to make your text sound more expert-like and whatever, here's some tips. First of all, don't use error codes. Error codes don't mean anything to the average person. Yes, most of us are familiar with 404, but all the other error codes, 500 and 502 and all of these things, they don't mean things to a lot of people. So don't make them front and center in your messages. Avoid technical terms like failed or invalid or aborted. In many cases, you can use an alternative, something like your file couldn't be uploaded as opposed to file upload failed, or your file couldn't be sent as opposed to sending failed or sending aborted. All of these things are much more accessible and they're at a reading level that is lower and that makes it more readable and and easier to understand for the average person. Avoid jargon unless you're sure your audience knows it. We can sometimes fall into this trap of plugging in all of these sort of technical words or these fancy words or these jargony kind of business terms. Don't do it. Don't do it unless you know that your product is super, super technical for a super particular audience. But you have to be really careful because maybe your audience is super technical and they have all that technical know-how, but they're not native speakers of the language that your product is in. And then that jargon might get lost in all of that. And the last tip for this is to use plain language. So instead of using words like utilize, just use. Instead of longer phrasing like in order to, you can use to. Instead of able to, can. Instead of assist, help. And there are lots of lists online that you can search for and you can find plain language lists and they'll just tell you all sorts of different alternatives that you can use instead. And all of these things make your product easier to use, they make it more accessible, and they reduce some of that friction and cognitive overload that users might encounter. Okay, we're getting till the end. So we're on the last mistake or the last myth. And the last one is let's make it clever. So we're at a point in time where we're sort of when my field of UX writing, microcopy, whatever you want to call it, started, the field is officially say about 15 years old. So when it started out, the real innovation in this whole idea of writing copy for interfaces was that it was something that no one really paid much attention to. You know, you had the engineer or the developer who just kind of typed in something into the interface and then it went up. And suddenly people started thinking about it and saying, wait, we can write and we can make the product sound like a human and people are going to interact with the product and it's going to be like a conversation. So let's make it sound like a human. So one of the things that happened was that products started having a lot of personality. And for that period of time, 15 years ago, that made a lot of sense because it was such a vast departure from where we were before. You know, if we had super technical developers speak, suddenly thinking about product speaking and having a language, that was really exciting. So a lot of people then took it a little bit further and they said, wait a second, we'll make our product clever, we'll make it funny, we'll make it have personality. We're now at a point in time where we're sort of, I would say the pendulum is swinging back and we're sort of trying to reach a more neutral place, which means that user-friendly is something that we always want to aim for. User-friendly doesn't mean clever. User-friendly doesn't mean funny. User-friendly means that users understand how to use it. And the reason that this matters is because, one, we're using lots of different products in our day-to-day. And I've already mentioned this a couple of times, this idea of cognitive overload and how much is going on for users. So we don't need every product to be hilarious and to be clever. That would be really tiring because you're using so many of them. The other thing is that users all around the world are typically using your products. You know, it's no longer the case where we just have a product that's being used by one tiny community of developers in one specific place, Silicon Valley, for example. Um, users everywhere are using them. So we want to make our products accessible and to make them inclusive of all different types of users. And so a lot of times those kind of clever, funny, um, witty, slangy type of things, which typically happen in English, maybe American English, those are the things that tend to fall flat. And then that makes a product not user friendly. So it might be funny, it might be clever, but then it's not user friendly because the user might not understand what it's saying. So let's look at a couple of examples. This might be a little bit hard to see. This is an old Airbnb screen, one of their first iterations. And I won't read you the whole thing, but one of the things that they used to say under the birth, they used to have all these little explanations under each field that you had to fill out in your profile. And it explained what they did, what they used it for. So last name, for example, says your public profile only shows your first name. When you request a booking, your host will see your first and last name. But then birth date says the magical day you were dropped from the sky by a stork. We use this data for analysis and never share it with other users. Now, the magical day you were dropped from the sky by a stork sounds very clever, but that's something that's very specific, not just to American culture, but this whole idea of babies being dropped by a stork when they're born is something that isn't going to resonate with a lot of different users, and that makes it less accessible. So it sounds clever, it sounds cute, but it's not necessarily user friendly. Now, they might not need this to complete this. Maybe the field birth date might be self-explanatory and clear enough as it is. But this is an example of where today, this is an old example, but today Airbnb doesn't say this because they know that it doesn't really make sense for their global population, for their global audience. Here's another example that says, it was on an app where I was trying to change my password and it says, uh-oh, could not change password. And the button says, okay. And this is one of those places, we see this a lot where people say, uh-oh, or oops. And you see that added to all sorts of error messages. Well, that may have been cute 10 years ago because it was innovative and it was new, but that's no longer cute because on this screen, I don't know what to do. I have this uh-oh, and then it tells me could not change password, but it doesn't tell me why. It doesn't tell me what criteria is needed to change my password. It doesn't tell me what I'm getting wrong. So all of these things just make it a frustrating experience that the fact that it says uh-oh at the top doesn't make it cute. Here's another old example from Flickr, which I remember when I first saw it 10 years ago or 8 years ago, I thought it was really cute, but I think in today's day, it doesn't fit. And what it is when you upload photos to Flickr, it would say, hold on there, tiger, on the loading bar. It would just say publishing, public, and then hold on there, tiger. What does that mean for a global audience? Does that make sense? Are they going to understand what that means? Do they know what hold on there, tiger means? You know, that's an idiom. It's not user friendly anymore. So when you're working on UX writing, I want you to think about 4 C's. Clear, is it clear? Is it concise? Is it consistent? And is it conversational? Not is it clever? That one also begins with C, but I don't want you to make that a priority. I want you to think about, is it clear? Is it short? Now, it doesn't mean compromise the message for the length, but if you can make it shorter, if you can make it simpler, that's great. Is it consistent? So are you using consistent terminology? Are you using consistent phrasing? And is it conversational? Because that usually means it's more accessible language. It's it's at a more readable level. So we're about to wrap up. But as we recap, as you're working on UX writing, whether you're the person who's doing it or someone else is doing it, I want you to ask yourself 5 questions. Did I provide all the information users need? So that might mean you have to add more because maybe the users will read that. You know, maybe they do need that extra text so that they have all the information they need. Did I consider the flow and the user behavior? So did I just, did I write copy that makes sense for the certain point in time and the interface that the user is encountering? Did I consider other concerns on my user's mind? So this is that idea of that competitor, all these different things competing for a user's mind. So am I considering those things? Am I thinking about the fact that maybe the user has a lot on their mind, and so I need to tell them that they don't need to worry about this one thing that they were thinking about, like that Netflix example, where I don't want them to worry about um, being charged. I want them to try it out without worrying. The next question, the fourth question is, can I simplify the language? Can I make it more readable? Can I make it more accessible for my audience? And the last question is, did I choose clear over clever? So I always want you to think about, is this going to be clear for my audience? Is this going to be clear for a global audience? Or am I trying to be clever at the risk that people might not understand it and that it's just going to cause more friction and more problems for my product? So we are at the end of time and we are going to wrap up. So keep these questions, take them above your desk, whatever you need, so that you can think about them and stop making common writing mistakes. Thank you so much. We'll answer some questions now. I know there were a lot of questions that came in, so I'm looking forward to seeing them and answering them. And I also look forward to connecting with all of you and seeing you again.
Exactly right. Exactly right, Merav. Thank you so much. And I'm sure you're going to receive a few requests from our leggers in just a few. Are you ready to take a look at some of the questions that were asked?
Yes, I am.
Wonderful questions, which I think, it's testimony for great content and great talk. So bravo to you. Fantastic job. We're starting with a frog who's asking, do you think it's possible to not skip on words the first few times something is shown, but then reduce it after it's recognized that it's an activity the user does often? For example, in the remove Merav's rights team example on Canva. So what Fraud is referring to is the case when there is a repetitive task for the user to make. And what she's asking if this is a good practice to use more of a text on the first time the user has to interact with that task, assuming that on the second and onward times that they will do so, we can use less text. So what do you think?
Great question. Yeah, I think though with a caveat, yes, you can definitely skip future times, but I think it has to be very specific to the context of where you're encountering this. So if it's something that users are not going to do that often, so maybe they'll do it once a year, then I don't want you to skip the second text, because that second iteration of it might come a year later and the user might not remember. But if it's something that they're doing every single day or every week or something regularly, then yes, totally. That's totally fine. But think about, how often is it happening? How often is the user using your platform? How familiar are they? How tech savvy are they? And also, how big is this thing? Removing a user is something that happens just once. But it's a big thing. So if there's something that is maybe not as important but happens more frequently, then you can kind of play around with that.
I love that you're saying that there is the importance of habit forming into it, something that we product managers are known for. And the second thing, you're saying that actually there is somewhat of a cost analysis here. Like, what is the cost of removing a user in the wrong way? I love that. Thank you very much for that. Iran is with another question here asking, what if it's all about technical terms? So all of the things that you mentioned about the vocabulary or the jargon of the industry, but more technical. So I know this question goes to many of our viewers. Iran was the brave enough one to ask that. So what is your tip or trick here when they meet this challenge?
I think the trick is to understand your audience and to see, which technical terms are okay to use and which technical terms are, not okay to use. And if you use them, then maybe you need to include a tooltip, or maybe you need to use a subheadline that explains what's happening. So sometimes you do want users to be familiar with the technical terms because they're important for your product or they're important for the industry. But then those are places where I want you to use the technical term, but also explain it for people who don't understand it.
And always use this jargon only if you have to, not for the sake of sounds clever, as you wisely said before. Thank you very much for that. Clifford here with another question. Our website, in my opinion, is too wordy. What approach does UX writing take to cut word count when you are new to the industry sector? In other words, how do you grasp the essential? Do you work with company insiders or do you take an independent, fresh look? And Ariella is here with a comment. I love when we can see this kind of interactions in the chat. A professional writer and editor, even if not a UX certified person, should be able to help with that. The thing is that some people deliberately use too many words because they're assuming readers are skimming and will not read every word. So back to Cliff's question. Thank you so much, Ariella, for your comment here. What do you think? What is the right approach when we feel like we need to cut upon some words,
Yeah.
but there is some of like industry or sector or domain know-how that we need to bring in.
Yeah. So hi, Cliff. I know Cliff. So thanks for the question. So I think it's great to have someone take an outside look, whether it's, someone from just outside of the company or someone who's really like has fresh eyes and as an outsider, because obviously when you're working on something day in and day out, you get tunnel vision. Like you think that everything is essential and it's really hard to kind of separate the wheat from the chaff. So that's something that I always recommend. So if you can get some sort of outsider to kind of take a look, that's great. As Ariella said, a writer and editor should be able to do that. And a lot of even freelancers, that's their job to take things and translate them into language that other people are going to be able to understand more easily. So definitely try to get an outside look. Another thing to think about is formatting. Maybe the issue is to think a little bit about how you can break up the format. Can you use more bullets or bolding or different section headers? So that might help you split up the wordiness into a way that it's more accessible and more scannable. And you'll also want to do general editing, but that might be a way to kind of make it more approachable.
Love that. Babu is here with another question asking, is left to right and top to bottom still is the best navigation for copy message to follow, or can we have pop-up screens for confirmation? Like, do you really want to delete? And he's thanking you for the content you're sharing with him.
Well, first of all, left to right, top to bottom obviously depends on your language. If your language is right to left, then do that, then mirror it. But if you're working in English, for instance, then yeah, left to right, top to bottom is still the best navigation. Pop-up screens, I'm not sure that I completely understand the question here specifically about this part. I think if you have a pop-up screen, then yeah, you still want to follow that left to right, top to bottom, and typically with the buttons too, we put the primary button actually on the right and the secondary button on the left. And the reason for that is because of the way again in English this and left to right languages, we are used to reading in sort of like a Z or a Z pattern. So we want our eyes to land on the action that matters most. And if you put that action, like that example that I gave of the confirm and cancel, if you put that action on the left, then the user is going to kind of make that Z with their eyes and then they're going to jump back. So that causes an extra sort of jump.
Love that. Thank you very much. Another question is here from Iran, our very own Iran, over Liger, asking 6 to 8 readability score is difficult to achieve. I sometimes struggle for hours to get it there. Not always successful. Any tips?
Okay, so yes, it's difficult to achieve. I don't want you to be struggling for hours. That sounds torturous. So there are lots. Try different tools. There are tools that you can use. There's Grammarly, I believe. There's Hemingway app, and usually these tools will even sort of underline text for you, and they'll tell you how to simplify it, or they'll sort of alert you to what you can simplify and what you can do, what you can swap out. So that's a way to do it. I think you can also try with Chat GPT. Another kind of simple, low tech way to do it is to read it out loud and think about, what does it sound like when I read it out loud? And is that something that I would say to a person that I know? And if it's not, then how would I say it? And that's probably will get you closer to where you want to be.
I love this one. Thank you very much. Another question is here from Ben, and this one is going to be challenging. So are you up for the challenge?
I'm up for the
Good.
challenge. Yeah, I saw the question.
Loving that. So Ben is asking, I'm interested in an alternative to the Zoom screen that you think would be easier to understand. I love this live review on Product League. What do you think would be a better solution here?
Yeah, so I'll start from the bottom. The one of the biggest issues I have with the screen and any screen that looks like this is that sign up and sign in are too close to each other. They look almost the same. So if you're using sign up, I want you to use login. If you're using sign in, I want you to use register or join or something else. This is one of those places where consistency is not good. We don't want to be consistent here because look at it. It's so hard for me. I've seen this screen 7 million times and I still don't remember which one I'm supposed to click on. And the sign up is in the middle. It's like if I'm reading from top to bottom, I'm never signing up for Zoom. I've been a Zoom member since before the pandemic, definitely. So that's an issue that I have with that. And join a meeting. In that case, when you click on it, you're usually entering a meeting ID. So I want that button to say enter meeting ID or join a meeting with ID or something like that, that really distinguishes the fact that that's how I'm joining a meeting, because any one of these will eventually get me to joining a meeting. And that's the problem that I have with this.
Loving that. Thank you so much. And we are here with another question with Babu was asking, how can we achieve better copy for different set of users on the same page? So most products have different personas of users. So sometimes we can find ourselves with the need to deliver different messaging or UX writing to different personas. What shall one do then?
So ideally, we would want to be able to segment. Can we segment? Can we divide the flow? Can we somehow make it so that they're not ending up on the same page? Because the moment that you try to talk to everyone on the same, you end up talking to no one. So that's the gold standard here. But I know that it's not always possible. So if that's not possible, then let's try to find a middle ground. Let's definitely try to aim for clear language, for simple language, because one persona might be more technical and one persona might be less technical. So we're going to aim for the less technical one. We're going to, even if that means explaining things more than the more technical one, what needs to know. Maybe we'll put it in tooltips or something like that, where it can be secondary. But we're going to try to aim for the lower, more accessible level, and for the messages that make sense for a greater kind of common denominator.
Loving that. And Babu is here. Thank you so much, Merav, for the click. Very informative session. Wish you all happy holidays and happy 2024. We wish you the same, Babu. Thank you so much for joining us today. And Ben, thanking you for the informative answer before redesigning the Zoom screen. Our last question for this session today.
What's my opinion on using
icons? With a big one. Erhan is asking, what's your opinion on using icons?
Yeah. Icons are problematic. They're not accessible. I didn't really get a chance to talk about it. I'm also not an expert on it, but screen readers are something that you should always consider, that some of your users may be using screen readers or other assistive devices. And so icons can be problematic for that, especially if they don't have alt text or something like that. So I don't want you to use icons instead of text. You can use them in addition, preferably say at the end of a line where a screen reader would announce it at the end, and then it kind of doesn't break things up. But understand that people are going to interpret icons differently. So that's a danger that we have, and that can harm the accessibility, and maybe it can also, if the loading isn't happening correctly, then users might not see the icons. So proceed with caution.
Love that. Thank you very much, Merav, for all the content, for all the answers, and for the overall UX writing party. I had the best time having you on our floor here today. How was it for you?
It was great. Thank you so much for having me, and thanks for all the questions. I loved hearing what people had to say and ask.
And you love to give them the answers they're looking for, which is amazing. Yeah, so thank you so much. We already see some wonderful comments in the chat. Everyone is thanking you for the content you shared with us today. Merav, thank you so much for joining us today. Merav
Thank
Wright,
you.
our UX writing expert for today. Can't wait to have you again on our floor sometime soon. Thank you, everyone, and everyone there tomorrow at the office. Think about all the things you learned today and bring the world some better UX writing. Bye bye,
Yeah.
everyone. Thank you.